the pure
Sure,
sacred.
sure, absolutely, absolutely.
You could eat a ham sandwich at your bar mitzvah. You know?
Wow, very good.
Yeah, and so ultimately, yeah, the terms are for Durkheim. The term where the action is sacred in religion. Profane is basically just everything that isn't governed by those rules. Everything you can deal with in any way you want to, interact with in any way outside of those rules. So again, the segue from this to what's interesting about religion and morality and popular culture in contemporary America, I think, is the phenomenon that I talk about in various stuff that I've written and I talk about in these books, I keep referring to, the phenomenon in American society of the relative decrease of the power of religion in the form that Durkheim talks about it in the elementary forms. That is, in these collective ritualistic forms that we were just discussing, seem to be, to a certain degree at least, on the decline. Again, even those people who talk about themselves as religious, they very often define themselves as religious in a very individualistic way that isn't about collective effervescence. It isn't about ritual. It isn't about anything shared. It's about there's a great phrase that Bob Bella and the other folks who wrote this great book called Habits of the Heart, in which he talks about religious and moral attitudes in America. They invent the phrase Sheilaism to talk about religious tendencies in American society today. And basically, Sheilaism it's named after a particular individual, Sheila, who basically says, when asked, what do you believe about religion? She says, here's this stuff that I've put together on my own. I don't really have a name for it other than to name it after myself, because it's so individual.
And I think part of the reason is the laws which mandated religious behavior are no longer enforceable. So those laws and edicts and tenets and dogmas are what kept people to a religion. Don't eat meat on Friday.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
No contraception. They locked you into religious belief, religious behavior.
Right.
I think. And when those laws became null and void, people were then free to be otherwise.
Right.
They didn't have to be.
Yeah, and I think certainly, as we mentioned before, when people became more educated. So when they see an institution like the Catholic Church being forced to yield to what is obviously factual, for instance, the Catholic Church endorses evolution, theory of evolution, but only because they were absolutely forced to.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
but over the centuries, the Catholic Church and similar types of institutions have had to yield, just simply because they could no longer justify it.
The modern world.
Right. Yeah, and I think certainly that's a big part of what we see going on in the American context and
3 minutes.
And elsewhere. 3 minutes.
Don't worry, he's coming back. We're going to do one more show. We can't let him go. This is too good. We'll continue this next week, but keep going. I didn't want to cut you off.
And so, so given this phenomenon that this is what we see happening, I think you're both right that I mean, and history will tell the tale, I think, ultimately, but I think you're both right that what this is a kind of natural progression from that organized cultic form of religious belief, which in previous times was much closer to universal in American society. As the power starts to bleed away from those organized and collective forms of religion, you get a lot of people not simply falling out of religion altogether, but going towards these individualistic kinds of faiths. And ultimately, I think over time we'll see more and more of them probably even falling out of that as well. Now, to go back to Durkheim. Durkheim argued that ultimately his position was that we should probably expect that individualism to continue and to increase in its vigor, and that's going to mean that ultimately, in a lot of ways, these religious forms that he's describing are going to become weaker.
Or unless a new religion crops up that capitalizes on that individual behavior,
or unless, as I think Durkheim sort of indicates, and as I try and pick up the ball from Durkheim and run with in my own work. Unless that social need for collective effervescence, for sacredness of some variety, even if not in the supernatural variety, unless that basically is taken up by other areas of the culture. And so as it bleeds away from those supernatural forms in the religious sphere...
What other part of our culture could...
We should probably actually save that for the next
stay
segment.
tuned.
Because I have a question I want to ask you, too, your observation about fundamentalism in this country. So,
yeah.
Okay. So, I don't
How
know
much time do we have?
We have 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different kinds of religions cropping up And I think the young people, and cults, some people call them cults.
Right.
Yeah, to me, you know, there's very little, what's the difference between a cult and an organized religion, really? It's just that the mainstream religions don't like the other ones, and they're the newbies, the newcomers on the scene, and so they try and put them down as cults.
Well, the Catholic Church is a cult. Catholicism is a cult.
They're all, the Mormons are a cult. And
Sure. And so, I mean, in sociological terms, they are all religions, however established they become, they begin as cultic movements. Christianity begins as this cultic or sect-like movement. Yes. With this one individual and his few followers, and it's only over history and as a result of all these complicated things that it grows into this big behemoth.
Well, you have to add the lies.
We're down to like 10 seconds left, so we have to say goodbye. And thank you for joining us on the Atheist Viewpoint. And thank you, Professor Riley, and thank you, Dennis. And we'll see you next week for part 3 of the Sacred and Profane in American Culture. Bye now.